What's up guys, my name is Josh, welcome back to another video. In this one we're going to be talking about the Zappies, which is one of the newest cards that's been released inside Clash Royale in the most recent update, which was 2 months ago. I'm pretty sure they released the Zappies, the Hunter, and the new arena, Electro Valley, which is where you can find the Zappies, coincidentally. We'll talk about the Hunter in another video because that's the card that I really want to touch on, because it's a super unique card and we've not seen something like that inside the game. You know, it deals with swarm units super well, but obviously that's for another video. In this one we're going to be talking about Zappies. You know, in themselves they're quite unique. You know, they stun any card that they come in contact with, so obviously they're great counters against cards such as Sparky and Inferno Dragon, because it just stops, completely negates the Inferno Dragon from being able to warm up, because you know it gets stunned by one. There's 3 Zappies in total, so it will get stunned by one, then by one, then by one. So they work in unison. So it's zap, 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 and so that completely shuts down an Inferno Dragon, which it was a good card to release, because the Inferno Dragon for me needed a slight haircut, a slight nerf, you know. And I think with the introduction of these with the Zappies, I think basically it's an indirect nerf, because instead of nerfing the actual card, they've released a card to counter the card, which is pretty smart, because you know they get to release a new card, which is always, you know, good for the people inside the game, because new cards, new excitement, and new, you know, anything new within the game is going to build excitement and get people to play. So I think that was a good call from them, you know, instead of just nerfing the Inferno Dragon. So but yeah, it completely negates the Inferno Dragon now. Anytime I've come up against the Inferno Dragon with Zappies, completely shuts it down. Like I said, it was zap, zap, zap. The Inferno Dragon never gets time to warm up, so it can never, you know, fully charge up to its capabilities. Same with the Sparky. I've not yet played against the Sparky with Zappies, but I can imagine it's the same thing. You know, the Sparky takes 4 seconds to warm up, but the Zappies constantly will zap, 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 and it will never be able to charge up the 4 seconds to be able to shoot. Now, one downside about the Zappies is that they don't actually do that much damage. They do the same damage as the Ice Golem, which is, you know, nothing. It's barely any damage, which makes sense, because if you made them have a high DPS, they would essentially be 3 Electro Wizards all in one. So I think it was smart for them to do that, because obviously then it wouldn't make the card overpowered. You know, when they released the card, it was quite, you know, mundane. Nobody wanted to use them. People tried to use them, but they didn't really have much use, because they were ground only. But inside the most recent balance update, they changed it so that they can target air and ground, which I personally think gave the card a new lease of life. You know, from being able to only target ground to being able to target ground and air. That's quite a pivotal change. You know, from going from only targeting goblins and skeletons and golems and anything that's ground, obviously, and to be able to target, you know, the supporting troops behind the golem, the baby dragon, you know, the bats, minions, all these different air cards that I couldn't target before. So that was a great update in my opinion. I still think it needs a slight, in my opinion, I haven't looked at the win rates, I haven't looked at the usage rates, but in my opinion, solely from me playing the game and me coming up against Zappies, I think they're in a good place. I don't think they need a buff. I don't think they need a nerf. For what they are, for what they do, and for what they offer, I don't think that if you buffed it again, I think they would become overpowered. You know, if you gave it a higher damage per second, or if you gave it slightly more health, I just think that, you know, they would be overpowered in that situation, because at the moment, when I come up against them, it's not, I don't struggle to play against them, but I definitely have to be on my game, like when I come up against them. Whereas before the update, when they were just targeting ground, I didn't have to worry about them. You know, I could let the tower deal with them, because, you know, and I still will let the tower deal with them if they're on their own. But if they're supporting troops behind, you have to think about it, because you can't. Whereas before you could play minions on top of the Zappies to get rid of them, you can't do that anymore, because the Zappies can target them. So you do have to think about what you can play against them. Obviously, the Zappies have low hit points, and they can be kind of, you know, countered against a lot of spells. You know, if you want for a even elixir trade, you could log zap them for 4, or you could fireball them for 4, or poison them. You know, you can. So they're very easy to get rid of if you need to. But behind a tank such as the Golem or the Mega Knight or the P.E.K.K.A, they're going to be really good because it forces the opponent to fireball, or forces the opponent to have to answer the Zappies, right? Because most people are running Inferno Dragon to take out tanks. So now that the Zappies are introduced, people are putting them behind Golem, putting them behind P.E.K.K.A, Mega Knight, and then when someone puts an Inferno Dragon down to kind of get rid of your Golem, you just have to put Zappies behind, and it's going to keep constantly zapping that Inferno Dragon. And then obviously you have to just put something else in, like minions or bats, to get rid of the Inferno Dragon, because the Zappies won't do enough damage on its own. But obviously it will stop the Inferno Dragon from heating up. So it forces the opponent to think a little bit more, you know, because if they fireball the Zappies, then you can come in with something else that needs to be fireballed. So it kind of creates a little fireball bait meta, in a way. Not a meta, but it's definitely in there somewhere. It definitely has its place at the moment. You know, there's this one deck I've been playing. It's the Three Musketeers, Goblin Hut, Zappies, you know, all these cards that need to be fireballed, Minion Horde. So once they fireball, oh, and the pump. So once they fireball the pump, then you can put your Zappies down, then you can put your Three Musketeers down, then you can put your Goblin Hut down, and all vice versa. You know, if I put the Goblin Hut down and they fireball, I'm going to put a pump down immediately. So it's it has its place, I would say, for sure. It definitely has its place right now in kind of quote-unquote fireball meta. And I can see it being in a lot of Three Musketeer decks, but I don't really see it, you know. Oh, I've seen it in bait. I've seen it quite a lot in bait decks recently. There's been a little bit of a comeback for bait with Zappies inside. I'm a huge bait player. It's one of the classic log bait is one of my favorite decks to play, and it's one of the decks you know, consistently good at playing with, and that I'm most skilled at playing with. At the moment, it's not great. The bait meta isn't great, or log bait isn't great. Zap bait's definitely up there. So the introduction of Zappies, you know, I think a lot of bait players have said to themselves, kind of, you know, let's put Zappies in place of, what do they replace it with? I'm pretty sure they replace it with the Tesla. So it's basically a moving Tesla, but with less damage. I don't personally like the bait deck with the Zappies inside. It's not for me. Like I said, I'm a bait player, but I'm not really a huge fan of that deck. You know, it carries the poison, which I don't really think has its place in a bait deck. I think Rocket and Log, or Rocket and Zap, are the two most common and most effective spells inside a bait deck, because anytime you see a pump or Three Musketeers, you're going to rocket them down, right? And then the princess to deal with the rest. But poison doesn't really do the same for me in the bait decks. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, talking about Zappies again, they definitely have their place inside the current meta. Some people would argue that they need a buff, just a slight buff again, like maybe a bit more damage or a bit more health. I'm not really sure where they would take it. If it was me personally, like I say, I don't think that they need a buff, but for me personally, I think if they were to get a buff, I would say a slight damage per second increase. I don't think they need more health. You know, let's keep them at the same health, but give them a slight damage increase, see where it goes, and if it's too powerful, then just rein it back in again. But obviously, I think if they go with the health side of things, you know, buff its health, I think it just creates this it creates an unsettling feeling that, you know, if they make it so you can't fireball Zappies, you know, for 4 elixir for 4 elixir, and you can't fireball them, then if someone fireballs the Zappies, then they're going to put Three Musketeers down behind, you know, Goblin Hut and all these other cards, and that will become the meta. And it is quite an annoying deck to play against. That's just my personal opinion. You know, I don't think they need to touch on the card really. I think it's in a great place. I don't think, you know, a buff or nerf is required. You know, like I said, I haven't looked at the usage rates. I haven't looked at the win rates. So I'm not really sure if it's in a good place in terms of percentage-wise. But from my experience, I feel like it's in a great place right now. I don't feel like they need to touch upon it. One thing I forgot to mention is how good the Zappies are at countering small swarm type troops like the goblins or skeletons or goblin gang or skeleton army. Obviously those troops can be used to counter the Zappies, which you have to look out for. But in terms of those troops coming at you and your tower and you defending, I think Zappies are amazing at dealing with swarm troops. You know, bats, minions, skeletons, goblins, any of those kind of small squishy cards Zappies on defense is really, really solid for those cards. And it makes sense that's what they've done, and that's the card they've introduced, because it's the meta right now is very swarmy, very zap bait, very log bait, very, any swarm troop, just rush the tower kind of deal. So Zappies is great on defense for those. And that's pretty much it for the Zappies card. I think I've covered most of the areas about the card. Like I say, final decision for me would be not to nerf it, not to buff it. I think it's in a solid place, and I don't think they need to touch it. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Hope I could give a good insight to the Zappies and what they're about, and how you can counter them, how you can use them, and if they're strong right now. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.